Hello, Graham from Arion Games here, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite little publications I put together for Advanced Fighting Fantasy. It probably took the least effort of all of them to put together because I didn't write most of it. There's not actually a huge amount of words in there, and it's not used by all groups, and it's certainly not used by all players. And it's the Sorcery Spell Book, as you can see on the screen here. So the Sorcery Spell Book came about because when the original Sorcery Gamebook series were published, Puffin published alongside it a little spell book, which was this. Now this had some fantastic art in, and what it had was it had all of the spells, each with their 3-letter descriptions. Now, as you can see, my original copy is beginning to fall apart. The pages are fairly yellowed around the edges. It's showing its age. And the idea behind this book was, as you play through the game book, you get to parts where it says, "Do you want to cast a spell?" So open it here. You meet a hill giant. Do you want to cast a spell? Do you want to cast Kill, K-I-L, Big, B-I-G, Yaz, Yob, or Dumb? Now, some of those are real spells in here, some of them are not. And the idea being was that you were supposed to read through this, memorize the spells in here, then play through this and remember what the spells were and what they did, which was a fantastic idea, quite innovative. But when I rewrote AFF, I wanted to get this sorcery magic into the game, and I converted the spells for the rule set, which was great. And then when it went out to playtesting, a whole load of people came back to me and saying they were using these as a play aid during their AFF games, which was great, except that this tells you what the spell does, but it doesn't give you the game stats. It doesn't tell you what it does in AFF, only gives you a rough description. So I thought, well, why don't I take the original art, take the original descriptions, and add in what the spells do? So I did. So I republished the Sorcery Spell Book, and I used the original art by the outstanding John Blanche. And you know, as you can see, there is a very distinctive style to this art. It's very, very evocative. You flick through this book and it really tells you what the spell does. Now, I mean, you look at this character here and you're obviously initially drawn to the face and the cloak, but he's got sort of knee breeches with stockings tied up with some sort of sash. He's got ridiculously turned up toes. He's got ridiculously baggy sleeve, but only one of them with a bracer on the other arm. He's got a staff with a rather amusing sort of punch's head on the top and a foot on the base. And then you look at his hat and you see the little rather strange face on his hat. That picture you could spend ages looking at and it would still tell you a story. So we had to include the original John Blanche art. What I also did was I included the original format. So we've got the spell name, we've got the original spell description with the stamina cost. That's taken straight from the original Sorcery Spell Book. What I've also then got is the AFF spell description at the bottom. So that's the same rules as in the AFF rulebook. And the reason I wanted to put the same rules in is because if you're a sorcerer character, you know all of the spells. You know every spell in this book. And there's a lot of them, 48 of them. So you know all 48 spells. Now you're never going to remember what they all do. If you're a wizard in AFF, you might have 5, 6, 7 spells, 8 spells, 10 spells. It's much easier to keep track of what they do than all 48 of these. So I wanted to put the description in because otherwise, as a sorcerer, you sit there with the core rulebook flicking backwards and forwards, or a PDF copy or whatever. With this, you have all of your spells there. And of course, it's one of the conceits of this that you have a spell book. A sorcerer has a physical spell book. The sorcerer character has their spells written down. Therefore, the player has something in their hand with the spells in. So we had to get all the rules in there. What we also then did was include, having all the art. You've got characters like this. No idea what that is. I don't think it's ever been written up as a creature in AFF. But again, it's just got. You look at it, you think, what is it? Where does it live? What does it do, etc. And so what we did was we then laid it all out. So for every spell, you have the description, you have the name, you have the rules, and you have the John Blanche artwork. And so between all of those, a sorcerer character has everything they need to play the game. Now, of course, what I also want to do was include extra bits in there. So I've included the oops table. So if you're casting a spell and you make a mess of it, you've got the table in there to roll on. I've got the rules for casting sorcery spells, the modifiers for preparing spells, for casting in combat, etc. All of the stuff that a sorcerer might need, a player of a sorcerer character might need during the game in order to play it effectively. Now, what I also did is I put a few extra bits and pieces in there. So I put some guidelines on playing a sorcerer, if you're new to it, some ideas about the fact they can wear armour and they can be better at fighting, but that stamina is their spell points as well as their health and their hit points. So I put some thoughts in about that. I put in rules for Sorcerer's Apprentice if you're playing anything other than a fully fledged sorcerer, which of course ties in really nicely with the novice character rules that are going into the combat companion. I also put in the rules for arch sorcerers, regional sorcery, and so on. So this book, although it really duplicates what you have in the core rulebook in terms of spell descriptions, what you also have is a way of, firstly, meaning the sorcerer player, or indeed players, as there may well be more than one at a table, has access to all of their spell information without having to hog the core rulebook. Also, it's a nice little thing to have. And of course, a sorcerer player can sit there in between sessions and just have a flick through and say, oh, that's an interesting spell, maybe I ought to try using that one. And it will speed play up, and it gives them something nice to have, and it is a play aid rather than absolute essential. So I just want to talk about that one. We've obviously got a lot in the pipeline for AFF coming up. There's a lot more I'm going to be talking about soon. I've got another Kish character to talk about, new books to talk about, the actual play is upcoming, and so on. But I just want to talk about that because if I ever just want a smile, I actually sit there and I just work my way through this book and I look at some of the fantastic illustrations, and there is obviously a certain nostalgia there, but they are so evocative that they do just make you smile. So that is one of those books for AFF that you most certainly don't need. You could play a long campaign, never need this book, never buy it. Of course I want you to buy it, of course I would, but the reason I want you to buy it is because it enhances your game. It just makes that game a little bit better for you, for your player, and so on. And that has always been my approach. If ever you've spoken to me at a convention, that's always been my approach to publishing. Make things that people want to have rather than have to have. Well, until next time, thank you for listening and good gaming.